Birazdan canlı yayına geçiyoruz. Hocam bir deneme şansınız var mı? Açık geliyor mu? Linkten.
Evet geldi şimdi.
Tamam. Gmail adresi farklıymış hocam. Böyle bir ters bir durum olmuş. O yüzden. Geliyor mu?
YouTube'da
Evet geldi
çalışıyor.
şimdi.
Hı hı.
Tamam. Hocam başlamak için ne kadar bekleyelim?
5 dakika daha bekleyelim.
Tamam.
Şenol senden rica etsem bu YouTube kanalına yazabilir misin? Bu kanaldan yalnızca İngilizce yayın yapılacak diye. Türkçe dinlemek isteyenler yazsınlar. Okay, I'm sorry Omar for keeping you waiting. We need to wait for another few minutes. It's okay. I think we can start. İyi akşamlar arkadaşlar. Öncelikle hoş geldiniz diyorum. Bu akşam önemli bir meseleyi konuşmak için bir araya geldik. Toplantıyı
Hello, dear friends.
toplantıyı eğitim sen Eğitim Sen Altınoğlu Üniversiteler Şubesi organize ediyor. Ben de Altınoğlu Üniversiteler Şubesi üyesiyim. Boğaziçi Üniversitesi'nde öğretim üyesiyim. E, Eğitim aynı zamanda Boğaziçi Yeri İş Yeri temsilcisiyim. Eğitim Sen adına konuşmak üzere Semire arkadaşımızı davet ediyorum.
Herkese merhaba, sesim geliyor galiba.
Evet,
Ben de aslında aynı girişi yapacaktım. Yani çok uzatmadan Omar Barghouti ve BDS Türkiye ekibine teşekkür ediyoruz. Filistin direnişini de desteklediğimizi ve üniversiteler boykotunu da önemsediğimizi söylemek istiyoruz. Dileriz Filistin mücadelesini anlatacağımız başka platformlarda tekrar görüşürüz diyeceğim. Teşekkür ediyorum.
evet. BDS Türkiye adına e, Harun Bey'i, Harun Turgan'ı davet ediyorum. Harun Bey bize kısaca BDS ve BDS hareketi ve BDS Türkiye'nin faaliyetleriyle ilgili bilgi verecek. Ondan sonra Omar Barghouti ile başlayacağız panelimize.
Peki, şimdi Ömer Barghouti burada olduğuna göre uluslararası BDS hareketini anlatmayı da ona bırakıp BDS Türkiye'nin 2009 Aralık ayında e, 2008 yılında Gazze'ye yönelik dökme kurşun saldırısının yıl dönümünde de kurulduğunu, uluslararası BDS hareketinin Türkiye ayağını örmek üzere kurulduğunu, çok sayıda demokratik örgütün desteği ile deklarasyonunu yayınladığını söyleyeyim. 2010 yılında o zaman kullandığımız isim Filistin için İsrail'e boykot girişimiydi. BDS Türkiye'de tanınmadığı için. Boykot yatırımların geri çekilmesi ve yaptırımlar hareketinin anlaşılması, tanınması için bir sempozyum düzenledik 2010'da. E, Daha sonra sürekli uluslararası hareketin önceliklerini gözeterek Türkiye'deki gelişmelere göre Türkiye'de gerek politik, askeri, diplomatik ilişkiler düzeyinde gerek kültürel, akademik ilişkilerde İsrail devleti ve İsrail devlet kurumları e,
Harun hocam sesiniz bir gitti. Bekleyin istiyorsanız. Nur hocam, Harun arkadaşımızı yanlışlıkla çevirmen yaptınız herhalde. Nur hocam, Harun arkadaşımızı çevirmekten çıkarırsanız.
Tamam. Evet Harun Bey devam edebiliriz.
Nur hocam yine değişmedi.
Are we waiting for something?
Yeah, there was a problem with the translation,
Okay.
interpretation. Harun Bey, devam eder misiniz lütfen?
Nuri hocam, Harun arkadaşı kimse duymuyor. Halen çevirmen gözüküyor. Onu değiştirme şansınız var mı?
Evet.
Nuri hocam, Harun arkadaşı sadece siz duyuyorsunuz galiba, biz duyamıyoruz. Kendisi halen çevirmen olarak atanmış. Onu kaldırma şansımız var mı? Harun arkadaş, devam edebilirsiniz.
Hayır, bir daha bir saniye. Evet, buyurun.
BDS Türkiye olarak İsrail'le askeri, politik, ekonomik ilişkilerin ve tabii akademik ve kültürel kurumlarla ilişkilerin hem ortaya çıkarılması hem de kesilmesi için çalışmalar yürütüyoruz. Son dönemde ticari ilişkiler belirgin bir şekilde gündem oldu. Özellikle Gazze'deki soykırım sürerken e, başlı başına bu Kırım'ın ihtiyaç duyduğu temel malzemelerin Türkiye'den gittiğinin ortaya çıkmasıyla biz de hem bu konuda kendimiz çalışma yürütüyoruz hem de yürütülen tüm çalışmaları destekliyoruz. Diplomatik ilişkilerin kesilmesi talebimiz her zaman var. E, Doğrudan askeri ilişkilerin ortaya çıkarılması ve bunların sesle ilgili sorun yok artık değil mi? Devam ediyor.
Evet hocam, sıkıntı yok.
Yok.
Sonlandırılması talebimiz var. Bu arada daha zor denebilecek olan, çünkü bir işgal ve apartheid devleti özellikleri gitgide daha çok ortaya çıkan, daha az gizlenebilir hale gelen bir devletle askeri ilişkilerin kesilmesini, ticari ilişkilerin hele bugünkü durumda kesilmesini savunmak daha kolay ve daha geniş bir onay buluyor. Buna karşılık akademik ve kültürel ilişkilerin neden kesilmesi gerektiğini daha çok anlatmamız gerekiyor. Bu alanın bir dokunulmazlığı olduğu, özerk kurumların söz konusu olduğu düşüncesi, yanılsaması dolayısıyla bazen oradaki en iyi insanları hedef aldığımız gibi eleştiriler gelebiliyor. Akademi boykot edilmez gibi bir ön yargıyla karşı karşıya kalabiliyoruz. E, Biz de buna karşı İsrail Akademisi'nin özelliklerini anlatmaya çalışıyoruz. Kişileri değil, kurumları hedef aldığını akademik boykotun. Tam tersine eğer İsrail içinde az ya da çok bu uygulamalara ve bu ırkçı, ayrımcı, işgalci sisteme karşı olanlar varsa onları dışlamak değil, tam tersine onlar içinde bir dayanışma kanalı açmış olduğumuzu e, anlatmaya çalışıyoruz. Son olarak Türkiye'nin 3 üniversitesini çeşitli İsrail akademik kurumlarıyla yapmış oldukları anlaşmaları iptal etmeye çağırdık. Bu konuda o üniversiteler nezdindeki girişimlerimiz sürecek. E, Ayrıca bu akademik denen ilişkilerin araştırma geliştirme yoluyla aslında bir tür askeri işbirliği anlamına da geldiğinin farkındayız. Bunlarla ilgili araştırmaları da sürdürüyoruz. E, Benzer bir şekilde Türkiye'de, İsrail'de ciddi enerji yatırımları olan Zorlu Holding'in bunu bir şekilde bu suç ortaklığını sürdürmesine karşı bir çağrımız var. Hem geniş bir alanda piyasada ürünleri var, çeşitli yatırımları var. Hem bunların teşhir edilmesi hem de özellikle zorlu plastik performans sanatları merkezinin bir aklama merkezi olarak işlev görmemesi için sanatçıları da duyarlı olmaya çağırıyoruz. E, Bütün bu yönleriyle bugün en kısa zamanda herkesin tepkisini çeken, herkesin duyarlılığını uyandıran Gazze soykırımının durması için, ama sadece Gazze'de ateşkes sağlanıncaya kadar değil, İsrail'in işgal ettiği topraklardan 67 savaşında işgal ettiği topraklardan çekilmesine, 48'de kuruluşuyla işgal ettiği topraklardaki Filistinlilerin eşit yurttaşlık haklarına kavuşmasına ve Filistinli yerinden edilmiş Filistinlilerin geri dönüş hakkının tanınmasına kadar boykot, yatırımların geri çekilmesi ve yaptırımlar çağrımızı sürdüreceğiz.
Çok teşekkür ederim Harun Bey. Now I would like to invite Omar Barghouti. Omar Barghouti is the founder of BDS movement. And Omar, I'm sorry for the delay, and the floor is you can talk about BDS International and your activities and maybe advise us how we can contribute to the national movement.
Okay, thank you. Just a correction, I'm a co-founder. It's a collective that's leading the VD. Just a Again, I'll repeat, just a correction. I'm a co-founder of the BDS movement, which is led by the largest coalition in Palestinian society. The Israeli business magazine, The Marker, has recently reported that Israel's electric company's plans to expand its facilities is facing a crisis due to the export restrictions or limited sanctions announced by the Turkish government. The Turkish Trade Ministry said, quote, the measures would apply to the export of products from 54 different categories, including iron, steel, cement, aluminium, fertilizer, construction equipment, aviation fuel, and more, end of quote. Many in Turkey believe that these measures do not go far enough, and they come 6 months late, if not decades late. Turkey's export of metals in particular has been indispensable for Israel's weapons industry for many years, including during the first 6 months of Israel's genocide in Gaza. A few weeks ago, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the Palestinian Territory, Francesca Albanese, presented a strikingly courageous, accurate, and timely report to the UN Human Rights Council, in which she concluded that, quote, there are reasonable grounds to believe that the threshold indicating Israel's commission of genocide is met, end of quote. Following the lead of South Africa's lawyers at the International Court of Justice earlier this year, Albanese contextualized Israel's ongoing genocide against 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied and besieged Gaza Strip. In its decades, she put this in the context of Israel's decades-old settler colonial project in Palestine and its apartheid manifestation. She wrote specifically, quote, genocidal intent and practices are integral to the ideology and processes of settler colonialism, as the experience of Native Americans in the US, First Nations in Australia, or Herero in Namibia illustrates. As settler colonialism aims to acquire indigenous land and resources, the mere existence of indigenous peoples poses an existential threat to the settler society, end of quote. Indeed, the genealogy of Israeli War Minister Yoav Gallant's depiction and treatment of Palestinians in Gaza as human animals can be traced to the dark history of European and Euro-American dehumanization and colonial subjugation, even extermination in many instances of non-European nations, the majority of humanity. In the same vein, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has recently said, quote, if you are not at the table in the international system, you're going to be on the menu, end of quote. 2 years ago, EU leader Josep Borrell said, quote, Europe is a garden. Most of the world is a jungle, end of quote. So the jungle, which has a high birth rate, he said, could invade the garden. Last May, in a video message celebrating the 75th anniversary of the establishment of Israel, Europe's latest settler colony, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, quote, you have literally made the desert bloom, end of quote, repeating a racist, dehumanizing colonial trope in a desperate attempt to erase the centuries-old indigenous Arab-Palestinian heritage that predated Zionist settler colonialism. She also tried to whitewash Israel's ongoing Nakba, ongoing systematic destruction of Palestinian land, culture, and human existence. Epistemic and cultural erasure, or epistemicide as some would call it, has often been a necessary ingredient of physical erasure, physical elimination, especially in genocide, as it makes it more tolerable and less contestable. Oppressors, after all, cannot be blamed for eliminating something that did not really exist to begin with, or whose existence did not constitute sufficient subjectivity. Addressing this erasure, the US-based Middle East Studies Association argued in a recently issued statement that Israel's genocidal war, which is waged with open support from the US and other Western powers, is, quote, calculated to achieve the total erasure of the Palestinians and their history from this small coastal strip. In short, it added, Israel is engaging in cultural genocide against the Palestinian people with the active support of its American and European allies, end of quote. Just as Western academic institutions had played an outsized role in laying the foundations and later developing the ethical doctrines for and technologies of colonialism, as Edward Said has exposed in his landmark Orientalism, today, many of these same academic institutions are striving to enable Israel to continue its genocide in the terra nullius of Palestine. Most do so by continuing their complicit business as usual with Israeli universities that have consistently been a pillar in Israel's regime of oppression, or by also repressing Palestinian voices and the ever louder voices of those defending Palestinian rights. They abortively strive to deprive us of our agency, our ability to articulate genocide, to resist genocide, to stop genocide. McCarthyism, censorship, suppression of freedom of expression and academic freedom would never be satisfied with erasing Palestinian voices only, though. This is only a test ground, a laboratory for developing mechanisms of repression that can be eventually wielded to further suppress other struggles for racial justice, economic and social justice, and climate justice. Soon enough, Israel will become the model for the global security state, and democracy will disintegrate into what the Congolese-American sociologist Pierre van den Berg calls Herrenvolk democracy, democracy only for the masters, as Israel has always been, according to Israeli historian Ilan Pappé. By perpetrating the world's first televised genocide, Israel's own laboratory in Gaza is trying to set a new paradigm of might makes right. Colonial powers that share what Naomi Klein calls a supremacist vision of safety and security for the few may then emulate this Israeli paradigm to exterminate or crush weaker nations and racialized communities that, in seeking justice, dare to defy systems of domination and subjugation. The massive influence of Israel's lobby and the geostrategic interests of Western corporate and finance elites aside, one of the key factors behind Western complicity in Israel's genocide and its underlying 76-year-old regime of settler colonial apartheid is the family affinity that connects the colonial West with Israel. A leading retired Israeli general, Itzhak Brik, has recently said, to the shock of many inside the Israeli military establishment and outside, quote, "We have already lost the war in Gaza, and we are also losing our allies in the world at a dizzying rate," end of quote. Why is this important? Because as Naomi Klein argues, many powers are worried. If Israel's Iron Dome could fail, she says, what about all the other Iron Domes in the face of the mass displacement of people spurred by endless wars and criminal climate arson and cruel economic policies of immiseration? Will they also fail? End of quote. Regardless of its motives, this Western complicity, which is not only in the West, it applies to other countries as well. But this Western complicity is at the center of Israel's genocide in Gaza. As senior UN official Craig Mokhaiber wrote days before resigning at the UN last October, he said, "This is a textbook case of genocide. The European ethno-nationalist settler colonial project in Palestine has entered its final phase toward the expedited destruction of the last remnants of indigenous Palestinian life in Palestine. What's more," he said, "the governments of the US, the UK, and much of Europe are wholly complicit in the horrific assault. They are, in fact, actively arming the assault, providing economic and intelligence support, and giving political and diplomatic cover for Israel's atrocities." One grave form of this complicity is the decision by many Western states to defund UNRWA, the indispensable UN agency that delivers humanitarian aid and services to Palestinian refugees in Gaza and in the countries surrounding Palestine, especially doing so during a genocide. The participation in Israel's use of starvation as a weapon of war makes these states that have cut off funding directly involved in Israel's genocide, as the US-based Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention has said. Through starvation, rolling massacres, including the latest flour massacres against starving Palestinians, the spread of infectious diseases, and the frontal attacks on UNRWA, Israel aims to ethnically cleanse over 1.4 million Palestinians from Rafah, a second Nakba to culminate the ongoing Nakba. This total complicity is destroying what's left of the credibility of the Western-dominated international legal system, as the system is also on trial at the International Court of Justice. This legal system is also on trial at the ICJ, not just Israel. Israel and the US-led Western establishment have been aggressively promoting a hegemonic version of international law that decisively turns it into a tool to justify and perpetuate systems of oppression. As the struggle that ended apartheid in South Africa has shown, ending state, corporate, and institutional complicity in Israel's system of oppression, especially through the nonviolent tactics of BDS, is the most effective form of solidarity. So allow me to explain a bit about the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement. Launched in 2005, the nonviolent, anti-racist BDS movement is led by the largest coalition in Palestinian society. It is inspired by the South African anti-apartheid struggle and the US civil rights struggle, but it's mainly rooted in a century of Palestinian popular resistance. It aims at ending Israel's occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid, and upholding the inalienable rights of the indigenous Palestinian people, especially the right of Palestinian refugees to return home and to receive reparations. Anchored in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the BDS movement categorically opposes all forms of racism, including Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. BDS targets complicity, not identity. A 2022 poll shows that 16% of all Jewish Americans support BDS, with the percentage rising sharply for those under the age of 40. They understand that there's nothing Jewish about Israel's siege, ethnic cleansing, massacres, land theft, and apartheid, let alone genocide, and therefore there's nothing anti-Jewish per se in supporting BDS to end these systems of injustice. Israel's regime of oppression, a model for much of the world's far right, harms not only Palestinians, but also millions of others around the world. Israel today is a partner of fascist parties in the West, most of whom are anti-Semitic to the core, and it's a partner of far-right and authoritarian regimes worldwide. It sells its military and security technologies and colonial doctrines as battle-tested, of course, tested on us and Lebanese bodies, through the export of its military doctrines and weaponized spyware technologies like NSO's Pegasus and others, and selling its disinformation and election rigging services as a diplomacy tool, Israel has for decades been a culprit in not just illegal surveillance in the West and much of the world, but also in war crimes perpetrated by dictatorships globally. Over the last 19 years, the BDS movement has built a massive network worldwide, supported by trade unions, farmers' coalitions, as well as racial, social, gender, and climate justice movements, together representing tens of millions worldwide. Due to the direct and indirect impact of the BDS movement, giant sovereign and investment funds have divested from companies and banks that are complicit in Israel's violations, as have major churches in the US. City councils from Liège and Verviers in Belgium to Oslo in Norway to Belém in Brazil have taken decisive measures to end complicity in Israel's crimes. In Turkey, recently, the cities of Adana and Antalya have cancelled their sister city protocols with their Israeli counterparts, Beersheba and Bat Yam, respectively. This followed intense campaigning by BDS Turkey and their allies. Large multinationals like G4S, Veolia, Orange, HP, Puma, and others have totally or partially ended their complicity in Israel's economy. In academia, culture, sports, and other areas, the impact and reach of BDS have grown enormously. Just recently, 5 universities in Norway have suspended academic relations with their Israeli counterparts. Since the beginning of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, this BDS impact has begun to influence some states. The movement, with its many partners, has been intensifying pressure on policymakers to end the complicity of states and corporations in Israel's war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide through mainstreaming our now widely accepted analysis of Israel as an apartheid state and advocating for targeted, lawful sanctions, particularly a comprehensive two-way arms embargo as a fulfillment of legal obligations under international law. The recently held UN Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution calling for a full military embargo against Israel, among other targeted sanctions. The impact of BDS has also been accentuated by the South African case at the ICJ, accusing Israel of genocide, and by the subsequent ICJ ruling on 26 January that Israel is plausibly perpetrating genocide in Gaza. On February 23rd, the human rights experts issued a groundbreaking statement that references the risk of genocide, UN human rights expert that is, that references the risk of genocide to call on all states to fulfill their legal obligation by immediately stopping all arms exports to Israel and imposing sanctions on trade, finance, travel, technology, and cooperation. This echoes the demands of the BDS movement. So it's important to say what Turkey is now doing, the Turkish government, is not a charitable act. It's fulfilling a legal obligation triggered by the ICJ ruling that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. According to the Genocide Convention, every state has a legal responsibility to act to end its complicity in genocide. SOMO, the Dutch Center for Research on Multinational Corporations, issued a report a few days ago saying exactly that. The report is titled Making a Killing. It reminds states of their legal obligations to prevent the genocide in Gaza and to end all complicity in genocidal acts and incitement. The report also says, quote, to comply with Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, states must take effective action to prevent companies domiciled in their jurisdiction from becoming involved in acts of genocide in Gaza and sanction them if they do, end of quote. So if a government tells you, oh, the relationship with Israel is between private companies, that's no excuse. Any private company domiciled based in Turkey means the Turkish state has a responsibility to ensure that this company is not violating international law, especially the Genocide Convention. It's a state obligation for Turkey and for every other state. Some states, in fact, have severed or downgraded diplomatic relations with Israel. Colombia has decided to end the import of Israeli weapons, while Canada, arguably the most obedient of the US satellite states, has decided to end arms exports to Israel. Norway's pension fund, the world's largest sovereign fund, has divested its $500 million worth of Israel government bonds. Malaysia has banned all Israeli shipping from its ports. Are we going to see Turkey do something similar? On February 12th, a Dutch court ordered the government to suspend the export of F-35 fighter jet parts to Israel. On February 29th, the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, the main ruling party in Spain, voted in parliament, along with other parties, for an immediate suspension of Spain's arms trade with Israel. On that same day, Colombian President Gustavo Petro announced the full suspension of arms purchases from Israel. On March 1st, Nicaragua filed a case against Germany at the ICJ under the Genocide Convention, accusing Germany of facilitating Israel's genocide against Palestinians and complicity in Israel's other crimes, including apartheid. Even in the US, where Israel's genocide justifying propaganda prevails in the mainstream media, the majority of US voters today support halting or conditioning military funding and arms shipments to Israel. Complicit corporations like McDonald's are admitting the significant impact of our BDS campaigns, and others like Carrefour, CAF, and AXA are feeling the heat. Last month alone, following pressure from BDS Japan and its allies that referenced the ICJ ruling that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, two major Japanese companies, Nippon Aircraft Supply and Itochu Corporation, ended relations with Israel's largest private arms manufacturer, Elbit Systems. Dock workers' unions in Belgium, India, Catalonia, Italy, Greece, Turkey, California, and South Africa have taken measures against Israeli ships or arms shipments to Israel, but we need to see much more. Tens of thousands of artists and academics have declared support for the cultural and academic boycott of Israel, which, as was said in the introduction, targets complicit institutions, not individuals. Belgium's ministers of culture have called for banning Israel from Eurovision, a ban for which we and our partners across Europe have been campaigning. The West Asia Football Association has called for suspending Israel's membership from FIFA, and calls for excluding Israel from the Olympics have grown tremendously. Turkey must take the lead and end all forms of state and corporate complicity with Israel's regime of settler colonial oppression. Also, institutions in Turkey must sever relations with complicit Israeli institutions, cultural institutions, and so on. The military security relationship with Israel has got to come to an end as the highest priority. The BDS movement calls on people of conscience everywhere, including Turkey, to escalate meaningful solidarity with the struggle for Palestinian liberation by, one, challenging and peacefully disrupting business as usual. One important example is organizing with trade unions to escalate peaceful disruption of arms shipments to Israel. Two, escalating academic, cultural, and sports boycotts of Israel and its complicit institutions, just as apartheid South Africa was boycotted. 3, escalating strategic boycott and divestment campaigns against complicit companies, especially those involved with the military, but also Intel, Chevron, Siemens, AXA, CAF, Carrefour, McDonald's, and so on. 4, organizing intersectional campaigns to pressure institutions such as city councils, like Adana and so on, universities, churches, cultural institutions, to adopt procurement and investment guidelines that exclude companies implicated in grave human rights violations anywhere. These guidelines can then be used by BDS activists to exclude companies involved specifically in Israel's genocide, apartheid, occupation, and settlements. 5, and last, building broad support for meaningful targeted sanctions, especially a comprehensive military embargo of Israel, expelling it from the UN General Assembly, from the Olympics, from FIFA, from Eurovision. To end, if you hate violence, end oppression. If you hate oppression, end complicity. If you love freedom, justice, dignity, and equality for all, irrespective of identity, as we do, mobilize pressure to help us dismantle Israel's 76-year-old regime of oppression, and along with it, the resilient structures and imaginaries of coloniality in the West and everywhere. Only thus can we ensure that no nation or community ever again faces epistemic or physical erasure or is placed on any hegemonic power's menu for insisting on justice and full emancipation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar, for this inspiring talk. Now we are going to take a few questions. Soruları alabiliriz arkadaşlar. Sorusu olan var mı? Maybe I can ask a question, Omar. Now, this recent escalation in the Middle East between Israel and Iran and involvement of the Western powers, how do you think that the situation is going to evolve in terms of BDS movements? Because this tension is increasing the polarization and the Western allies of Israel is backing whatever Israel is doing, and the um, the peoples of the Western countries are demonstrating and supporting Palestine, and even in United States there are many demonstrations. But when the tension escalates, there is a possibility of going to a war, a full-scale war. How this escalation is going to affect people's efforts to support the Palestinian cause, do you think?
Well, first, we believe that Israel's attacks in Syria and elsewhere are meant to distract from its genocide in Gaza. Israel wants a sideshow so that people will stop looking at what the horrible crimes and the savagery and the depravity of its criminal actions during the genocide in Gaza, from the destruction of hospitals and homes and massacres upon massacres of innocent civilians and starvation and so on, as has been very well documented by international human rights experts. Israel wants people to forget that and to focus on its ongoing attempts to involve the United States in a regional war, so to speak. So we should resist this by keeping the focus on Palestinians being subjected to genocide in Gaza. This is the main issue. This is the core of the issue. And it's rooted in decades of Israeli settler colonialism. That is the root cause of all this violence, basically. So we should not allow the hegemonic Western media to lead the discussion elsewhere. Of course, they're just waiting for anything to defend their favorite settler colony, Israel. If Israel attacks any other country, they justify it. If that other country responds, then they call for sanctions against that country. But 6.5 months of genocide have not provoked calls for sanctions among those hypocritical colonial Western governments. So, what we should do is keep the fight up at the grassroots and civil society level, building power to affect policy change. There's no other way. We've got to challenge this international order that is dominated by the United States, that says any ally of the US and the colonial European powers can do whatever they wish. A live stream genocide, as Israel is doing for the first time in history, and they get away with it. But every other country that is not an ally, that's an enemy of the US and colonial Western powers, will be sanctioned and will be beaten and will suffer from consequences if they do anything. We've got to challenge this order, and we say international law can only have meaning and credibility if it applies equally to everyone. No one should have an exceptional status. Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa once said, Israel is placed on a pedestal above everyone else, above international law. BDS basically is taking Israel off the pedestal, so it's treated like everyone else that commits the same crimes, not better and not worse. I don't expect this side show, this attempt to distract, will help Israel avoid the wrath of the peoples of the world that have seen its savagery and can no longer accept its lies, its fabrications, its propaganda, although all or the lies that come from its Western anti-Palestinian allies.
I certainly agree. Yes. I mean, the policy change in Turkey is a result of some very weak demonstrations that was focused on the problem, and uh, also thanks to the efforts of a single um, journalist who deciphered the exports to Israel. There was a public opinion that the government should change the policy, and some commentators even believe that the results of the last election was affected because of this. Um, are there any other questions? Başka sorunuz var mıydı arkadaşlar? I think there are no other questions.
Either I was too clear or too unclear.
I think you were clear, very clear. And also, you know a lot about the relationship of some Turkish companies with Israel. Um, any questions? Sorusu olan var mı arkadaşlar? Well, in that case, I would like to thank you very much, and I hope that um, our efforts will result in some positive change, um, and the Palestinian people become free and own their own state, build their own state.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks
Good
a
night.
lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Katıldığınız için teşekkür ederiz.